everybody, welcome back to Avalon, episode 11. This is the last episode where we're going to work on this sort of central 3-block grid expansion as we kind of move further and further away from that commercial downtown area we built in the 3rd or 4th or 5th episode, something like that. This is one more of these like 3-block builds we're going to do. And then I think from here what's going to happen is I want to start focusing on adjusting the grid, having like kind of some variance in that a little bit. Focusing on, again, really like picking out areas, sort of like we did with that big commercial area that'll be a little more detailed, a little more interesting, and a little more, dynamic. And then surrounding that with lots of housing, lots of, blocked out areas that are a little less, I don't want to say less detailed. We're going to still have all of the nice assets that look very nice on their own without all these props and things, but the goal again is to really go for a large scope with this project, and I want to make sure we have plenty of props to do that. So it's going to be necessary, especially with the scope of this entire project, to have plenty of areas that are sort of just blocked out, cookie cutter neighborhoods with all these, big apartment buildings and all that stuff. So we're going to see a lot more of that as we move on here, but this area has been a little more slow going as we, start off the project with all of these areas that are really, really like dense central downtown, and nearly every block needs to have all the details and all the interesting stuff, because I want to make sure that when you're panning around in the downtown area, you just see all the details and all the cool things, and there's just like cool stuff to look at on every block. So that sort of explains why it's been a bit slow going, moving forward. But for this last little 3-block expansion, what we're going to do is work on these 3 blocks, and you'll notice that the central block actually has a elevated railway going straight through the middle. And the funny thing about this is this would be like nearly impossible to work with and still maintain density in the early stages of this game, right? Like we didn't have Move It, we didn't have all these mods to just plop buildings wherever we want. So it's pretty cool that we can take an area that's so divided by this train station and really pack it with buildings. I mean, there's literally like 15, maybe more buildings in this single block that's like divided by a train railway, like an elevated railway. So it's pretty cool that we can do that with these mods. And I really wanted to take the time to, especially in this central block, add all the details and make this look like a really cool, interesting area, especially above the railway, because as I mentioned in previous episodes, I want to eventually come back and shoot some videos from the POV of our elevated rail system, and I want to make sure that when you're driving through the, you're riding through the downtown area, you'll have a nice view of all the buildings and all these details and things kind of overhanging, right over top of the railway. So we'll definitely have that. Lots of apartments that are kind of facing outwards here, because there's a bit of a break in the skyline, so we can have some windows and things around here as well. But using a lot of these big flat apartment buildings to sort of define this line alongside the railway here. And this is like probably one of the heaviest clipped areas so far in the build, but I was really happy with how it turned out. I was unsure if we were going to be able to kind of mask all of this clipping, but I felt like with the use of these modular buildings here and a few other apartment building assets, and then of course lots of props and things, we could really make it seem as if this is all one seamless building and not like a big cluster of buildings near the end of the build. So this little bridge here is certainly the focal point of the entire build. We're going to come back to it a bit later on. Right now we're just kind of defining some of the beginnings of this project, but I wanted to make this one something special because I really feel like it's going through a pretty central part of town, and you can see that we're using a lot of these nicer apartment buildings, some nicer commercial buildings that sort of feel like they have outdoor seating and restaurant kind of stuff going on. So definitely a nicer part of town, and I want to make sure that we reflect that with nice looking elevated rail and all that stuff as well. But here I'm going to go in and start working on this little alleyway underneath this, and the reason why this even exists is we needed to have road connections for those inner buildings, and that's kind of a challenge with these super wide blocks. I mean, these blocks are pretty unconventionally wide. Usually when you look in like a downtown area, even somewhere like Manhattan or something, you'll have the main avenues that are much wider, but you're going to have lots of side streets that are basically, blocks the width of single buildings, and that's not the case at all here. We're working with a lot more room in between the blocks, so we've got, multiple buildings kind of packed in, And I think I mentioned this in previous episodes, but a lot of that comes from Salt Lake City. I had a lot of inspiration from that. I kind of love the idea of having these giant blocks where pretty much every single block can have something interesting going on in the middle, and kind of gives room for some pedestrian areas or some shopping centers or what have you in between the buildings. So that's kind of the goal with this, and we're going to move away from this as we get further from the downtown area, but this is one of those areas where we definitely had to pay attention to making sure that there was road connections and ways to actually get to these inner buildings here. I also wanted to expand a bit on our metro network because, believe it or not, we still don't have any public transit in the city. That's not to say that I'm not thinking about it. Obviously, we are plopping all of these metro lines, and I'm thinking very carefully about where we're going to have train stations and metro stations and transfer sections and even bus routes to an extent in certain parts of the city. I'm just not implementing them quite yet because we don't have enough stops to really justify putting out a line. And to be honest, the traffic isn't really backing up quite as much as is necessary to actually start putting those things in. And you'll also notice that our population isn't crazy high yet. We're still putting in lots of commercial buildings, lots of office space, so our population hasn't jumped quite yet. But as we get to the outskirts of these downtown blocks and we start changing the grid angle and we start building out all these neighborhoods, we're going to have a lot more high density housing all around this area, and that's when we're going to really have a skyrocket in our population, and we're going to have to start thinking about public transit. And in fact, I might even go in. I know I've had a lot of requests for this, but I might go in once we actually have the public transit in place and do like an episode, like a half episode where we just kind of go in real time and talk about all the train routes, all the metro lines, and all the things going on in the city, because it is very layered and it's kind of hard to see what's going on just in these time lapses. I'm aware of that, but like I said, there's not really much to see right now because we don't have any transit lines that are actually in use yet. But once they are, which will probably be in the next couple episodes, then I'll start doing some periodic episodes that are sort of like, overview episodes where you can see what's going on. And hopefully I can manage to get a decent frame rate. I might even do some, I call them cinematic shots, but I'll do some really slow rolling kind of overview shots with some of the info panels up as I talk, because I literally get, this is not even an exaggeration, I get like 5, 6 FPS in the downtown area right now, and that's even with the settings turned down. And that's just because we've got all these props, all these buildings, all these people moving around. It's not going to be any better, I don't think, in the future. As we move away from the downtown area and we have more of these kind of filler sections that I was talking about that are like just purely either zoned or filled with residential buildings that are a little more simple and with less props put down, we should have some better frame rate in the outer areas. But certainly in this downtown area, frame rate's kind of an issue, so I might just do something creative like that where we have some shots with the layers opened up so you can see what's going on without actually doing real time. I don't know, we'll see about that. I'm still kind of on the fence about that one. But anyway, we're getting into one of my favorite parts of this whole build, which is, or at least this build for this episode, which is this elevated train area. So like I was saying before, I really feel like all these nice buildings just kind of justify having a really nice looking elevated train line that's got some sort of sound barrier support in here, so we don't have all this noise going on. Obviously we're in like the middle of downtown, so it's not like you can really reduce the noise that much, but at the very least it can look nicer, and we could add a little bit to this bridge and make it look more interesting than just the stock train network bridge that's already there. So we got these little sound barrier sort of walls going in, and then I thought maybe we could have some pipes kind of running along these as well. That sort of fits the theme, and I wanted to make sure that we carried these pipes on into the alleyway, because once again, I really want to make sure that that little section where the train runs through is just like full of cool details and things to look at as you ride in a train underneath all the buildings, and you're kind of just like in this canopy of pipes and industrial stuff all kind of between these buildings here. So we'll carry that on as we get over to that area, but I kind of use these pipes not only as, pipes, I guess, like you would expect, but they almost make like a border, like a wall that kind of masks the imperfections between the connection for these little glass sound barriers and the bridge itself. So I thought that was kind of a nice use of that as well. And I do use these AC units occasionally where the bridges end to kind of define that point. I guess that's the best way I could say it. Like, it just looks a little awkward to have the pipes just end there, and I feel like having this little, it's almost as if like on top of the support that's holding the bridge up in the first place, we've got some mechanical stuff, some units that are sort of rerouting different things, whether it be the maybe there's like some utility stuff running along the bridge over top of the road there, or something along those lines that would sort of justify something like that. So that's what that's about. I don't know. Maybe I'm just over justifying it here. Maybe it's just nice looking stuff. I don't know. But regardless, I was pretty happy with this bridge so far. But I wanted to kind of take it to the next level, and I will talk about that in a little bit because we still had one more block to detail, and I didn't want to forget about that. So going into this block, I designed again a couple of these little planters that I wanted to put in front, and this whole building is supposed to be like, I think this is actually like I can't read that from here, but I'm pretty sure it's like one of those a big movie, like not Time Warner, but Warner Bros maybe, or maybe it is Time Warner actually. I can't remember. It's one of those, I think, but it's like a big like central hub building for a big corporation, and I wanted to have this road moving in, and I kind of liked how the whole thing just kind of looked, this big arcing area that gave a lot of open space in this area, because there's just so many buildings tightly packed that I felt like we needed to have at least one block on this area that had lots of open pedestrian space for maybe some food carts or some outdoor markets or things of that nature. So that's kind of what we're going for here. And I had a bit of trouble, honestly, filling out this area. Like I think initially I designed like a whole like tree kind of park looking cluster that fit in some planters, and I put it in there, and it just kind of felt out of place. So I went back and I changed it a little bit, and I think what I settled on actually was like a whole bunch of these modern looking kind of square planter parks I'm going to put down here like this, which I thought was kind of a cool, interesting design. It was kind of fun to play around with these a little bit and see if we could make like a almost modern art looking sculpture-esque thing here, with some trees kind of planted in between. And then it sort of breaks up the big open space, so we can have some park benches here and there, and it's like a nice place to kind of hang out or whatever outside of this big building here. Lots of these little smaller pieces as well, and lots of copy pasting that I think was kind of masked by the complexity of the design. It didn't really seem too obvious that we were copy pasting stuff, so it wasn't a big deal there. And I think here I'm going to add in a couple more of these planters before we go into, here we go, the little outdoor shopping areas. So I did use some of these like food cart things that I think are actually from Park Life or something like that. I think those are actually vanilla. I'm not quite sure about that, but I added a few of those in, and then I completely forgot until like the last minute that I have food trucks, and I don't even know if I caught that on camera, but I do add some food trucks in as well because those look fantastic as well. But we're just about done, I think, with this area over here.Maybe some more things to kind of fill this space. Again, I'm kind of just looking at this area and trying to figure out how I can make it all look like it's nice and a part of this whole block, because it sort of was feeling to me like we were missing something. Like maybe it should have some more details. I think these concrete joint segment divider things kind of add a little bit to that as well, because our concrete is like a flat texture right now. So I think that helped a little bit, but I do know that I worked a lot off camera on this area after I finished, because I just felt like there were some things missing, and I was pretty happy with the end result. But at the time anyway, I was just kind of playing around a lot with stuff, and it was kind of hard to think of things to do, because again, it's definitely a different environment than what I'm used to working in. This like big snowy, sort of industrial looking city downtown center can't really fall back on the same things that I would do in a project like, say, Rhinestone Island or something like that. So I had to get a little creative with that, but I think that in the end it still looked nice, and I think these trees really brought it all together, having some greenery around here to sort of, I don't know, it feels like if you were sitting at some park benches in the middle there, you wouldn't feel like you're so exposed. You've got these nice little trees and things kind of blocking the sound a little bit and blocking the views. You're a little more privacy maybe. I don't know if privacy is the right word. You're kind of in the middle of downtown there, not really very private. But anyway, that is pretty much it for this area. I think just a little more. Oh, you know what? Actually, I did use, I think, a few of those like dirty props that I used underneath the highway, and I think that was the last episode where we had that like Michael's down there. So a little bit of that also to kind of dirty up certain areas. And of course the lighting as well, I almost forgot. Lighting is very important in this area. Have some pedestrian lighting around here that kind of matches everything else. Now this part, okay, this is what I was looking forward to. This is probably one of my favorite parts of, honestly, maybe the whole city. Like I had this idea of using the taxiway lights, which are very dim, very nicely colored. They're not too overbearing, and they don't brighten up the area too much, almost as like lining for this bridge here. And I just kind of laid out some lines of them. I tried elevating them and then plopping them down on this bridge, and I just love the look. Like, it's the perfect amount of lighting. It makes the whole bridge just look like super cool, super modern. And I think I'm going to use this in a few other key areas in the city, but it's pretty awesome. Even when you zoom out, and even during the day, you can see all the lights are still on. So it's pretty great, like for cinematics, especially when you zoom out and you look from the top, you got this like nice bright blue sort of glowing bridge thing going across the middle of downtown. So I'll use this in a few other places that I feel like really deserve it, you know, some very key parts of the downtown area. But I do think it looks awesome whenever you're in the train and you're driving along this area, and all of a sudden you enter this like blue, this blue bridge area with this like bright colored lights that fly by as you pass through. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think it was a kind of cool design, and I'll definitely do that in later parts of the build. But all that said, we are pretty much at the end of the episode now. I hope you all enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.